data, and at the end of the day, breaches are usually about data. I didn't say this at the beginning, but remember that attackers, no matter where they're from, if they're criminals, if they're nation states, whatever they are, they're usually looking for data, because data has value. Now, whether that's value in terms of espionage, spying, whether it's corporate or nation state stuff, or data is valuable because they just want to make money, because they can hold you to ransom, they can ransom it, they can sell it. So usually the ultimate goal of attackers is to get data. What they want to do with it afterwards depends on exactly what they're about, but that's why data security is really important. And actually, if you think about security, and you think about everything I've talked about so far, we've talked about securing everything around the data, not the data itself. And that's what we often do in security, which needs to change. And of course, building new things in general, building any new technology, of course, gives a new avenue for data leakage. So, for example, I was talking about model inference, inferring the data that your model's been trained on. I don't worry about those too much yet, because as I said, I think we're not even doing the basics right, but it is certainly true that there are some new avenues for data leakage. Right, quickly, let's look at an app. This is, I'm going to put the whole thing up. This is how an app works, and I went too far, and you clicked one too far. So here's an app. A user puts a prompt in, the AI application has looked at the prompt, it will go, the LLM, the application sends it to the LLM, which will then go and grab some resources and skills, etc. Then it generates some content, sends it back to the user. I know that's a very quick explanation. But let's think about where we have data sources in this flow. So if it's going out to the internet, could be random internet data, which is super reliable, as we know. There can be anything there. Also, we could be looking at internal data stores as well, so documents or databases, whatever you're storing internally. Also, stuff that you didn't know you were storing internally. I know we always use the example, I don't know, it probably has happened, and if it hasn't happened, it probably will do. For example, say your organization has got everybody's salaries on an Excel spreadsheet that's just stored in someone's OneDrive. I know, God, I really hope not, but do you know what? You know
Clutching my pearls, just thinking about it.
You know, because everyone knows the world runs on Excel.
Oh yeah.
You know someone
does
this, rather than I don't know, a real payroll system. But can you imagine if you asked a Copilot, find me everyone's salaries, and if you have no data controls, then rather than, now, as I was saying, using a Copilot or any AI, the data was already accessible to you as the user, but it would have been harder for you to find it, whereas a Copilot goes through your environment looking and finding documents. Way easier. So, you could pull stuff that you're not allowed. Has anyone used Copilot and search for something and come up with something really weird that they didn't expect? Yes. Mine was very out of date, but I was like, oh, if this was years old, this would be interesting. This is irrelevant now, but had I found this a few years ago?
Mine was exactly what you described. Salary of the whole company in an Excel sheet on a OneDrive somewhere.
Was it actually?
I could find it with Copilot.
Oh, bonuses.
I once asked the question, can you tell me about the documents that our CEO has written?
And you could get them all?
Well, there were some documents. I'm not sure if I should be allowed access, but it's oversharing big time.
Yeah, oversharing is scary stuff. So look at all this data. I'll put the whole thing up. Look at all this data. Oh, hang on. Look at all this data. So it's obviously, it consumes data, structured data, and then if you open your Copilot AI up to the internet, of course, well, everyone knows the internet is a dumpster fire of stuff, so there's all that stuff. Then it creates data as well, so it creates, I was asking Copilot to try and create some of these slides on the way here on the plane, it didn't work. I think that was to do with the internet on the plane, but transcripts, of course it pulls transcripts on Teams. I really don't want AI to pull some of my transcripts. I'm not gonna lie, no one wants to see that. Even the ones on Teams. And then there's telemetry, of course, as well. It's creating all kinds of stuff. Would anyone here want, I don't, personally, although, anyone here want someone to pull all the things they've asked their Copilot or whatever AI you're using, all the prompts? No, it's not like there's anything super spicy. It's just more embarrassing some of the things I have to ask it. But especially when I argue with it, like once, hey, it gaslighted me once. Anyway, and we did. It told me it was making a graph and it wasn't, and I was like, you're not making it. And it's like, yeah, and I'm like, you're like legit not making it. It never made it. I gave up in the end. But look, also then when it makes these things as well, who owns it? There's you know, what if an HR person says, you know, give me the, you know, I want a list of everybody who's low performing on performance improvement or something like that. And then that gets stored somewhere, and then someone else finds it. Spicy. And this isn't even data leakage. This is important to remember. This is all stuff that goes on within your organization. This is what we call oversharing. So oversharing is like internally, but this can cause a lot of damage internally. Data leakage is when this goes external. Now, of course, some of this stuff going externally is bad too, but even internally within your organization, some of this stuff being shared is bad. So, let's look at all these things. And then we have something here. We've got all these internal data stores, so you know, cloud, MP65, whatever you plug it into. And then we have what we call dark data. It's data that we don't even remember is there. Again, it doesn't matter how old your organization is. Even if your organization is only a couple of years old, or it might be 20, 25, 30 years old, you will have some weird ass data like hanging around that everyone's forgotten about. And who knows what that might be. And even if it's not something that's sensitive in the sense that you don't want everybody to see it, it could skew your AI results. Your AI results might become really inaccurate because it's looking at all this crap, basically. So there's a lot of reasons we need to look at our data. So what are the rules? Restrict AI access to data. This is principle of least privilege. You can see I sound like a broken record because I'm actually saying the same things in a slightly different context. Again, your AI should not have access to stuff it doesn't need to. So you should not just, when you build an app or a co-pilot, whatever it is, just say, hey, have a look at the whole organization. Off you go, take all this data. Because again, it shouldn't need that for a start. It should only get access to whatever it needs access to do the job that you need it to. And again, I say AI, but this is the same for an agent. Your agent doesn't need access to everything. Imagine what the agent could start doing when it's got unlimited access. So if your AI or your agent doesn't need access to the data to do the job you're making it for, don't give it access.
One question.
Yes.
Why would organizations give agents more access than users?
Because they're lazy and it's just easy to build. I absolutely guarantee you that is happening today.
Today we have controls on a user level that everyone doesn't have access to everything, and we design everything around that.
Some organizations
we did.
Yes.
I would just give agents everything.
Because it's just
Like-
easy. And they don't think about it as well. People just don't think. They're like, oh, agent needs access. And it's going back to, you know, I was saying that we've had a lot of focus when we talk about access to data. We think about it, and this is security's fault to a point. We always think about identity and access to things in terms of a human user, not a machine. Now we're starting to change now, and we're saying, hey, this is actually both problems.
Machine is a human now.
Also a machine is a human, but we have not focused. I think that we've just put so much focus on limiting a human user's access to things that people almost just sort of forget. They're not looking. When you point it out to them, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, I shouldn't do that. But people aren't thinking because we're not talking about it enough, or we haven't historically talked about it enough. So
Because when you say historically, I think with unstructured data, one of what we see now with unstructured data is something that historically did with search, for example, right? So oversharing and all that, and now this is kind of like a bit multiplied because you're not searching for a term, it's able to gather the data. So it's not a direct, but an indirect way of getting data. I think that makes it even more relevant in terms of getting it. So restricting AI access to data, I get that with APIs, ACLs, and others, but I think shouldn't the focus be more on the other side already, like, okay, restricting access to anything that doesn't need access to it. So your data classification and information protection, getting more of the...
Well, it's both. So trust thing. It's restricting access to literally every single bit. So not everyone, the AI, it's any application, any AI, any agent should only have access to the data, the environments it needs access to do its job. People who, users should only have access to the AI that need access to the AI. It's actually wash, rinse, and repeat along every single stage. And it's difficult, like I'm not gonna lie, this stuff is difficult to do. But as I said, security is straightforward, I believe, it's straightforward and common sense in terms of understanding what needs to be done, but actually implementing it consistently is really hard. And what sucks, unfortunately for us, on the good guys, is that we have to get everything right consistently every single time. An attacker only needs to get something right one time to get in. And so the odds are always stacked against us, but we have to keep trying, because we do. Also, that's why I have a job, so that's not terrible. Create separate apps for specific purposes. Again, this is about limiting scopes. Like, you shouldn't have God mode AI that touches everything and does everything. Because again, yeah, we call it an omni-brain. You don't have like God of everything AI. It's a really bad idea because it's almost like making an AI agent of global admin, which is just like my nightmare scenario. Because if that gets breached, you're gonna have a really bad day. And you've just made some attacker's day. If they just breach some app that can do everything and search everything, game over.
I'm sure every organization has a person like that. We're trying to replicate that.
Oh, they probably do, yeah, but like it's much harder to compromise a person. I'd rather have a person, but we shouldn't also, because that's a bad thing, because then they leave and no one knows what's going on. And then of course, there are defenses we can put in place. Do people in Foundry, have you looked at content filtering, the prompt, the jailbreak stuff, prompt injection stuff? You just have to tick a box to turn it on. That disturbs me, go and look at it. So when you go into content filtering, so the hate, the sexual stuff, violence, we also have prompt injection and jailbreak attempts. Now they're turned on by default nowadays, not indirect prompt injection, but we give these to you as like, you just have to turn them on. We actually do it for you, so there's no reason to not have this turned on. Please go do the thing. And then I'm just gonna, so look, this is kind of where these boundaries sort of sit, you see. So your data access controls is actually something that's almost separate to your AI and building things. Data access controls you should do anyway, but as I was saying, a lot of people don't. The application controls, of course, is people shouldn't be allowed to put things in the prompt if they don't want to, and then the actual input and output of the prompt is done by content filters. And then, of course, making sure your AI model doesn't have access to everything, because it will give the secrets it knows, because it will. So don't give it things, because think of AI like a small child, you know, like a toddler. As a small child, you say, don't tell anyone this, and then they immediately go tell someone. So the trick is, as with small children, you just don't tell them, because they can't be trusted. It's true. Think of AI like a small child. Okay, last up, and then we will be done.